tiga bafute. Hey, uati, basien ruadiga, ani hebige, merili daliburiga, uguya, sun tiga bafute. Abuhaya, aguron wanigi, sereme bon, sereme bon. Abuhaya, tida son wanigi, sereme bon, sereme bon. Abuhaya, asasirai bagari, sereme bon, sereme bon. Abuhaya, agarani hatu wanigi, sereme bon, sereme bon. Hey, uati, pasien ruadiga, ani hebige, merili daliburiga, buguya, suntiga bafute. Hey, uati, pasien ruadiga, ani hebige, merili daliburiga, buguya, suntiga bafute. Chibabale wagrima, areda wagida bawanigi, gibeti bisubudi, wabureme. Chibabale wagrima, areda wagida bawanigi, gibeti bisubudi, wabureme. Hey, uati, basien ruadiga, ani hebige, merili daliburiga, uguya, suntiga bafute. Hey, uati, basien ruadiga, ani hebige, merili daliburiga, uguya, suntiga bafute. Abuhaya, wabadi nagwa, sereme bon, sereme bon. Abuhaya, lida wageira, sereme bon, sereme bon. Abuhaya, adiwara wabadi nagwa, sereme bon, sereme bon. Abuhaya, nadagume wabadi nagwa, sereme bon, sereme bon. Hey, uati, basien ruadiga, ani hebige, merili daliburiga, uguya, suntiga bafute. Hey, uati, basien ruadiga, ani hebige, merili daliburiga, uguya, suntiga bafute. Hey. Waguchi bungiu, lida son nabureme, kudeme nabu, nyabi abu lau sung di figon, le adiga nale, haruma gedabana. Chiba benoi, magarugunuguchi, adunde haban, suwada sagwe, suwada sagwe, yubungi yubaba, ligi ya na puse. Suanda Sagwe. Thank you. Thank you.
agirere hani wa yuna waba amurari banegetia anaga wa you make elencho agirere hani wa yuna waba eligi ego wa ya bibe fire fire ya guglencho walu wa hene ya muya so aligi ego wa ya bibe fire fire ya guglencho walu wa hene ya muya so You may nege buga wagera be buga daga hamutuwa harutia. You may nege buga wagera be buga daga hamutuwa harutia. Haligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulesho walu wa heine ya muyaso. Haligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulesho walu wa heine ya muyaso. Buga wagu wadua yuru megi wadua heine ya wagera. Buga wagu wadua yuru megi wadua heine ya wagera. Ani ya guliumo duna shururute bimete ya bawachuga wabia. Ani ya guliumo duna shururute bimete ya bawachuga wabia. Uariba negatia wagae hagireri hania wa yuna waba. Uariba negatia wagae hagireri hania wa yuna waba. Amurariba negatia anagawa yuru megilecho hagireri hania wa yuna waba. Amurariba negatia anagawa yuru megilecho hagireri hania wa yuna waba. Amurari banegetia anagawa yuru megilencho hagirere hani wa yuna waba. Amurari banegetia anagawa yuru megilencho hagirere hani wa yuna waba. Eligi ego wa ya bibe fire fire ya guglencho walu wa heine ya muyaso. Aligi ego wa ya bibe fire fire ya guglencho walu wa heine ya muyaso. Walu wa negetia anagawa yuru megilencho agirere hani wa yuna waba amurari ba negetia anagawa yuru megilencho agirere hani wa yuna waba eligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulencho walu wa heine ya muya so aligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulencho walu wa heine ya muya so walu wa heine ya muya so walu wa heine ya muya so
Even though
walu wa
we were
heine ya
exiled,
muya so
I am Memedua. Garifuna. Nevertheless, we are here. We are alive.
You may nege buga wagaira be buga daga hamutuwa harutia. You may nege buga wagaira be buga daga hamutuwa harutia. Haligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulencho walu wa heine ya muya so. Haligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulencho walu wa heine ya muya so. Buga wangu wadua yuru megi walua heine ya wagere. Buga wangu wadua yuru megi walua heine ya wagere. Ani ya guliumo duna shururute bimete ya bawachuga wabie. Ani ya guliumo duna shururute bimete ya bawachuga wabie. Uwariba negetia wagae Hagireri hania wa yuna waba Uwariba negetia wagae Hagireri hania wa yuna waba Amurariba negetia Anagawa yuru megilecho Hagireri hania wa yuna waba Amurariba negetia Anagawa yuru megilecho Hagireri hania wa yuna waba Amurari ba negetia anagawa yuru megilencho agirere hani wa yuna waba Amurari ba negetia anagawa yuru megilencho agirere hani wa yuna waba Eligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya You may nege buga wagaira be buga daga hamutuwa harutia. You may may nege buga wagera be buga daga hamutuwa harutia. You may nege buga wagera be buga daga hamutuwa harutia. Haligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugule sho walu wa heine ya muya so. Haligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugule sho walu wa heine ya muya so. Buga wagu wadua yuru megi wadua heine ya wagera. Buga wagu wadua yuru megi wadua heine ya wagera. Ani ya guliumo duna shururute bimete ya bawachuga wabia. Ani ya guliumo duna shururute bimete ya bawachuga wabia. Uwariba negetia wagae hagireri hania wayuna waba. Uwariba negetia wagae hagireri hania wayuna waba. Apurariba negetia anagawa yurumegile cho hagireri hania wayuna waba. Apurariba negetia anagawa yurumegile cho hagireri hania wayuna waba. Apurari banegetia ana. You may nege buga wagera be buga daga hamutuwa harutia. You may nege buga wagera be buga daga hamutuwa harutia. Haligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugule sho walu wa heine ya muya so. Haligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugule sho walu wa heine ya muya so. Buga wagu wadua yuru megi wadua heine ya wagera. Buga wagu wadua yuru megi wadua heine ya wagera. Ani ya guliumo duna shururute bimete ya bawachuga wabia. Ani ya guliumo duna shururute bimete ya bawachuga wabia. Uwariba negetia wagae hagireri hania wayuna waba. Uwariba negetia wagae hagireri hania wayuna waba. Apurariba negetia anagawa yuru megile cho hagireri hania wayuna waba. Apurariba negetia anagawa yuru megile cho hagireri hania wayuna waba. Apurari banegetia anagawa yuru megilencho hagirere hania wayuna waba. Apurari banegetia anagawa yuru megilencho hagirere hania wayuna waba. Eligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulencho walu wa heine ya muya so. Aligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulencho walu Yurume nege buga wageira be buga daga hamutua harutia. Yurume nege buga wageira be buga daga hamutua harutia. Haligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulesho. Walu wa heine ya muyaso. Haligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulesho. Walu wa heine ya muyaso. Buga wagu wadua yurumegi wadua heine ya wagera. Buga wagu wadua yurumegi wadua heine ya wagera. Ani ya guliumo duna shururute bimete ya bawachuga wabia. Ani ya guliumo duna shururute bimete ya bawachuga wabia. Uariba negatia wagae Hagireri hania wayuna waba Uariba negatia wagae Hagireri hania wayuna waba Apurariba negatia Anagawa yurumegile cho Hagireri hania wayuna waba Apurariba negatia Anagawa yurumegile cho Hagireri hania wayuna waba. Apurari banegetia anagawa yuru megilencho agirere hani wa yuna waba. Apurari banegetia anagawa yuru megilencho agirere hani wa yuna waba. Eligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulencho walu wa heine ya muyaso. Aligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulencho walu wa heine ya muyaso. Walu wa heine ya muyaso. Walu wa heine ya muyaso.
Even though
Walu wa
we will
heine
take
ya
time,
muyaso.
I am Memetua. Garifuna. Nevertheless, we are here. We are alive.
Yurume nege buga wageira be buga daga hamutua harutia. Yurume nege buga wageira be buga daga hamutua harutia. Haligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulesho. Walu wa heine ya muyaso. Haligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulesho. Walu wa heine ya muyaso. negetia anagawa yuru megilencho agirere hani wa yuna waba apurari banegetia anagawa yuru megilencho agirere hani wa yuna waba eligi yego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulencho walu wa hene ya muyaso aligi yego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulencho walu wa hene ya muyaso walu wa hene ya muyaso walu wa hene ya muyaso
Even though
walu wa
we will
hene
take
ya
time,
muyaso
I am Memetua. Garifuna, nevertheless, we are here. We are alive.
You may nege buga wagera be buga daga hamutua harutia. You may nege buga wagera be buga daga hamutua harutia. Haligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulencho walu wa hene ya muyaso. Haligi ego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulencho walu wa hene ya muyaso. Buga wangu wadua yuru megi wadua heine ya wagere. Buga wangu wadua yuru megi wadua heine ya wagere. Ani ya kuliumo duna shururute bimete ya bawachuga wabie. Ani ya kuliumo duna shururute bimete ya bawachuga wabie. Uwariba negetia wagae Hagireri hania wayuna waba Uwariba negetia wagae Hagireri hania wayuna waba Apurariba negetia Anagawa yurumegelecho Hagireri hania wayuna waba Apurariba negetia Anagawa yurumegelecho Hagireri hania wayuna waba Apurari banegetia anagawa yuru megilencho agirere hania wayuna waba Apurari banegetia anagawa yuru megilencho agirere hania wayuna waba Eligi yego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulencho walu wa hene ya muyaso Aligi yego waya bibe fire fire haya gugulencho walu wa hene ya muyaso walu wa hene ya muyaso
seeing the students here makes me feel proud that our future is, of course, in good hands. We have a packed program for you today, and I know that you'll be well edified by the time you leave here. Let me take this opportunity to inform you that we have books on sale outside by Games Book Center, and also we have books on sale from Miss Lucia Ellis, and you would hear more about her a little bit later on. But as we begin this morning, I want to ask you to reflect for a moment on the indigenous people, to reflect a minute on the Garifuna people, even as we listen to the first verse and chorus of this song by Manzangi, Hail Garifuna.
Our great history would show centuries ago in this land, our wax and carrots inhabited SVG. Long before Christopher Columbus ever had a plan, Hussein discovered our great country. A group of Africans came here from Africa, and they mix and mingle with the Amerindian. They got together and created a race called Garifuna, and the history of our great people began. But most intentions don't know the history of we Garifuna, a history of our people we must remember. Hail Garifuna, our carrots mix up with African. Because people of this land, great is our history, great is the Garifuna's legacy. Oh, yo, 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 hail Garifuna, so fearless, courageous, and strong. Focus even when they were down. Great is our history, great is the Garifuna's legacy. Oh, yo, 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 we must remember, we Garifuna, sing praises to our ancestors. Hail Garifuna, we must remember, we Garifuna, sing praises to our ancestors. Hail Garifuna.
Hail Garifuna, beautiful song indeed, right? And of course, I have the privilege of saying that Manzangi, we have been friends for a very long time. We actually went to school together. He's a Vincentian. You can find the song online, Hail Garifuna, Manzangi. Great is our history. Great is the Garifuna's legacy. At this moment, I would like to invite our moderator, Miss Sharon Garwe, and she's the acting marketing officer of the UWI Global, and of course she would moderate this first part of our program today. Let's make her feel welcome, please.
Binatu. I hope I get that right. Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to have you all here this morning. Let me get straight into it. We have so many things, a packed program this morning, so let me get straight into it. And let me also welcome you to the University of the West Indies Global Campus. We acknowledge everyone here. We acknowledge the head table, those seated here, of course, and we acknowledge President of the Garifuna Association, Mr. David Darkey Williams, Zoila Ellis as well, and we acknowledge United Nations rep as well, and other dignitaries from Belize, Honduras, and even St. Vincent and the Grenadines and other parts of the world. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Lovely to have you here. All right, straight into the program. We are going to welcome our first speaker, Young Gonzalez. Young Gonzalez. He is, well, we were supposed, let me apologize, it was supposed to be Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonzalez. He is unable to make it, but of course, Minister of Finance, Camilo Gonzalez, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he is the former ambassador to the United Nations and attorney at law. And he's also, like I said, the son of the world boss. Put it, Uncle Ralph. Welcome to the podium, straight into it, and get into the meat of the matter.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'll tell you a little secret if you want people to call you young into your 50s. Get involved in politics. Good morning to everyone. Good morning to the members of the head table. I was glad I was there to add some gender balance to the table. Welcome to everyone who is here as part of the conference, and particularly to our friends from the secondary schools. I think I count 3 different secondary schools here today, and I want to welcome you all and applaud you for being part of this conference, even if your teacher made you to come. We're still happy that you're here. And I've already spent the morning apologizing. I was just apologizing to Ms. Hoyt, who said, "Oh no, I thought your father was going to be here." So let me make it a global apology to everyone. The Prime Minister was supposed to return to St. Vincent and the Grenadines on Saturday from Cuba, where he was on official business. But en route back, matters escalated or devolved in Haiti, and there was a special emergency CARICOM meeting in Jamaica that took place yesterday with the head of CARICOM, the representatives of the US and Canadian governments, and certain prime ministers from around the region who have a particular interest or particular history with the challenges being faced by the Haitian people at the moment. And so he sends his apologies, but you can appreciate the emergency nature of that meeting that demanded his presence there. He's en route back now, and he will try to show his face at the conference tomorrow, but he was unable to be here with you today for circumstances entirely beyond his control. So I apologize. You have a very, very poor substitute today. And I apologize as well because when I walked in and saw the program, I realized that the entire day was about Baliso, essentially. And when the Prime Minister called me yesterday, he said, "Write something about Baliso." And those are my instructions. I didn't realize that that the entire day was discussing various aspects of the issue of Baliso. And I fear that my comments may be a little bit too general, but we will take them as an introductory, as an appetizer to the more focused comments that we'll have from the rest of our distinguished panel. I was not invited to speak here today. I'm a substitute, and I remember that I was invited once to speak to the Garifuna conference, and so unimpressive was my contribution that they never invited me to speak again. So I'll try to be as brief as I can, but I did write some remarks last night, and I'm going to subject you all to them this morning. As I understood my mandate, it was to place Baliso within the context of reparatory justice, specifically CARICOM's 10-point plan for reparatory justice, the government's pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goals, and our increasingly urgent pursuit of historical reclamation and remembrance as we mature as a nation and as a component of this Caribbean civilization. To discuss the future of Baliso, we must first consider its very harrowing past. We must then consider how the quest for identity begins with repossession of the natural environment and repossession of the narrative of our collective struggle to reclaim collective memory as an essential step in our journey from chronology to lived history. When we see our past not as a series of linear tragedies on a colonial timeline, but as a lived history and a shared memory, we advance in our own journey of self-actualization and sustainable development. Genocide is in the news these days. The state of Israel is currently prosecuting a viciously effective campaign of genocide against the Palestinians, seeking to slaughter and displace an ethnic group that they have held under colonial occupation for decades. We in St. Vincent and the Grenadines are distressingly familiar with the broad outlines of this tale. The story of British engagement with the Garifuna in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is the story of repeated and ultimately successful attempts to conduct genocide against a people. Colonial Governor Sir William Young wrote a book called Account of the Black Caribs in the Island of St. Vincent. Our secondary school students, you know about Young Island. Well, Young Island was named after a colonial governor called William Young. And he wrote a book that is in many ways an account of his repeated attempts to dispossess the Garifuna of their land while forcibly and physically displacing them from St. Vincent's fertile and potentially profitable real estate. In August of 1765, and that's a full 3 decades before the Garifuna were exiled to Baliso. In 1765, Governor Young wrote to London, complaining, and I'm quoting Governor Young, that the Caribs are altogether uncivilized, and the blacks particularly of an idle, untractable disposition, and that their scattered villages, quote, interfere much with the laying out of plantations for sale, and that the course of action that would be safest and most for advantage of the colony would be to offer at the same time other lands in Bequia, where they cannot be hurtful, in lieu of those they quit, but not permitting them ever to take up any land again in any other part of St. Vincent. So 30 years before the exile of the Garifuna to Baliso, Governor Young was already hatching a plan to get rid of the Garifuna. And his idea at the time was to relocate them all to Bequia and to never allow them to return to St. Vincent. This original plan was ultimately set aside because, and I'm quoting again, so far as it is recommended a removal to Bequia, though a beautiful and most healthy island, and I know Louise would agree with that, it was deficient in rivers, essential to the comfort and satisfaction of the Caribs. So the plan was, let's get rid of them. They're taking up too much valuable land in St. Vincent. We can't divvy up the land and sell it as plantations because these Garifuna, the one is living in a village over here, one is another village over there. They're claiming all the land in between. So we can't sell the land. We can't divvy it up. Let's move them all off to Bequia. And then we can sell this great land that we have here in St. Vincent. But at the time, 30 years before their removal to Baliso, somebody said, well, there are no rivers in Bequia. And fresh water is hard to come by. And the Garifuna, rivers play such an important part in their life and their livelihood and their culture that we shouldn't send them to Bequia. And it's ironic that in 1765, Bequia was deemed too inhospitable to the Garifuna. But by 1796, 31 years later, Baliso was apparently suitable for their relocation. And I'll return to that point a little later, because if you've ever been to Bekwai and been to Baliso, one is a little bit more inhospitable than the other. So by 1771, having given up the Bekwai plan, Governor Young authored a new plan, suggesting that, and I'm quoting, "We are of the opinion that the positive refusal of the Caribs to agree to the terms offered by us on behalf of the Crown, or to take any oath of allegiance to the Crown, makes it absolutely necessary for the security of the lives and the property of our inhabitants that some steps be immediately taken to prevent their committing outrages unpunished. In our opinion, the most effectual means of reducing them to obedience will be to carry a road through their country under protection of sufficient military force, and after allotting them lands for their ample subsistence, and then to sell the remainder, which would very fully repay any expenses incurred by the arrangement of building the road, and contribute to keep them in order by mixing white inhabitants among them." So plan B, if they're up there in the bush by themselves, we'll just cut a road straight into Garifuna territory. We'll relocate them to a small part, and just to make sure that they behave themselves, we'll mix some white people in with them as well. And that will keep everybody under manners, as they say. It is a matter of historical record that for years, the Garifuna consistently and creatively resisted this British attempt to reduce them to obedience. And that resistance led to the outbreak of the so-called Second Carib War. In the aftermath of the Second Carib War, in turn, led to the closing sentence of Governor Young's book. The last sentence in his book is this: "The Council and Assembly of St. Vincent, in the instructions to their agent in London, declare the sole alternative to be that the British planters or the Black Caribs must be removed from the island of St. Vincent." So at this point, it's either them or it's us. But we cannot live in this island together. Somebody has got to go. And it is at that point that Baliso enters the shared memory of the Garifuna globally and the lived history of the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. For this part of the story, we turn a critical eye to the account of another British historian, Charles Shepherd, who wrote a well-known book called An Historical Account of the Island of St. Vincent. And according to Shepherd, the governor issued, I'm quoting, "The governor issued a proclamation on the 24th of June, this would be 1796, declaring martial law at an end, and on the 13th of July, a colonial assembly was summoned. Previous to this, the inhabitants held a general meeting with the governor to discuss the measures proper to be adopted towards the Caribs, when it was proposed that the small island of Baliso should be appropriated for their temporary reception until the intentions of the government could be ascertained. The proprietor of Baliso, Mr. Campbell, cheerfully gave it up for this purpose." Now, permit me a little tangent. There's a reason why Mr. Campbell was so cheerful in providing Baliso as the Alcatraz of Garifuna freedom fighters. First of all, he was ultimately compensated £1,731 and 15 shillings. In today's money, that is roughly 1 million EC dollars. In other words, Mr. Campbell got $200,000 a month to lease Baliso as a prison island and death camp for the Garifuna. More than that, though, Mr. Campbell had recently purchased an interest in Mustique and was, in his own words, I'm quoting him in a letter that he wrote to the colonial authorities, I am in constant dread and apprehension of an invasion of the Caribs. The Garifuna occupied most of the island at that time and heavily regulated his production and developments there. Removal of the Garifuna made Mustique and made Campbell's investment far more profitable. 3 decades after the genocide, grateful planters in Mustique happily owned 370 enslaved Africans who produced 400,000 pounds of sugar, 13,000 gallons of rum, and 25,000 gallons of molasses each year. It's good for business to get rid of the Garifuna. According to the revisionist history of Charles Shepherd, the Garifuna were, and I'm quoting Mr. Shepherd, given to understand that they would be removed to Baliso, where they would be supplied with a sufficient quantity of provisions and water for their support. And in their ultimate removal, they would be furnished with every convenience necessary and essential to their future existence. Doesn't sound bad. Indeed, the very first batch of displaced Garifuna were given food and water. They were then brought back to St. Vincent and forced to tell their suspicious brothers and sisters rosy tales of how good life was on Baliso. But the Garifuna warriors weren't having it. Charles Shepherd's book states that the son of the murdered paramount chief, Joseph Chatoyer, promised that he and his family would submit to the British and go to Baliso tomorrow, not today. He said, come look for me tomorrow. And quoting Mr. Shepherd's book again, when Captain Lauder and his force made the necessary arrangements, he proceeded to persuade the Caribs to submit, but he found their numbers very much reduced. For upwards of 400 had fled into their retreat into the woods. And among that number who retreated was the orator, Chatoyer himself, and all those who had been most liberal in their promises of submission. So when they came upon him, he said, check me tomorrow. Wrong's back. And when they came, he was gone because he had no intention of submitting. The same day, continuing to quote Shepherd, Lieutenant Laborde of the Rangers was detached to Grand Sable with a party of about 30 men to receive the submission of the Caribs in that quarter and conduct them to Mount Young and on to Baliso. On his arrival, he found their houses abandoned and themselves under heavy arms to the number of 200 in possession of a convenient little eminence from whence they called him and ordered him, the British, to withdraw immediately. So he shows up with 30 guys. He's going to grab these Caribs and take them back to Baliso. But he found 200 guys waiting for him with guns. And they said, they ordered him to withdraw immediately, declaring at the same time that they would never submit to the English and that they did not revolt so much from the prospect of death as from the idea of submission. We will rather die than submit to the British. Please excuse yourselves. And it says, I love this British writing, the inferiority of his force rendered his retreat both prudent and necessary. As the British tried to round up Garinagu for their exile to Baliso, resistance continued. Armed Garifuna militias attacked the British at Grand Sable, Turma, and Connery. The British resorted to a strategy of cornering Garifuna villagers and starving them into submission. The starving, weakened prisoners were then forcibly relocated to the inhospitable island of Baliso. Indeed, Dr. N. Dickinson, the doctor charged with overseeing the well-being of the Garifuna on Baliso, noted that the majority of them were in, quote, an emaciated state when they arrived, weakened and susceptible to disease. And also, quite contrary to the assurances that the exiles in Baliso would be furnished with every convenience necessary and essential to their future existence, Dr. Dickinson bluntly stated that the island was, quote, by no means favorable to the comfort and convenience of its new inhabitants, who regard the luxury of immersion in fresh water an indispensable necessity of health. Neither does Baliso afford those fruits and vegetables which constitute a principal part of the diet of these people. What happened next is well known to the participants of this conference. Of the 5,000 Garifuna deported to Baliso, roughly half died over the course of 5 months. Dr. Dickinson himself tallies 2,412 deaths among the so-called Caribs. In August, 12 died. In September, 100. In October, 600. In November, 750. And in December, 950. Even this number might be an underestimation, because as you notice, Dr. Dickinson started rounding off his numbers to the nearest 50. 100, 150, 750, I mean, who's counting? The blood of those 2,412 Garifuna victims still stains the soil of Baliso today. And their bones litter the landscape of what is essentially a mass grave. Their remains were never properly buried or respectfully treated in accordance with tradition or indigenous custom. One of my favorite works by the famed Martinican writer and philosopher Edouard Glissant is his collection of essays in the book Caribbean Discourse. He has an essay called The Quarrel with History, and it's particularly apt in today's discussion of Baliso. In it, and throughout the collected essays, Glissant connects dispossession of land and the imposition of the European plantation system in the Caribbean with the erasing of collective memory and attempts to create a non-history for peoples victimized by colonial oppression. He observes repeated attempts to twist the meaning of heroic acts and remove them from the popular memory. He asserts that any community without a collective consciousness and detached from an awareness of itself will not be bound together by collective memory, but rather a history that is often reduced to us as a chronology of natural events. And he urges Caribbean people to re-territorialize or re-naturalize the Caribbean island, which for him is a historical monument and a place of memory. So, as Glissant forcefully says, nature or land, once severed from its meaning, is as impoverished for man and impotent as being subjected to revisionist history. And this is where we find ourselves today, with the heroism and genocide of the Garifuna reduced to a sterile chronology of dates, and the mass grave of Garifuna victims repeatedly peddled as a potential playground for rich foreign investors. Our ability to collectively feel our history, to feel it on a visceral level, and a shared and unified experience is hindered now, as it was then, by the colonial instinct to value real estate above Vincentian lives, heritage, history, and patrimony. If history for you, secondary school students, is Columbus discovered us in this year, the slaves were freed in that year, and another thing happened in another year, then you're not learning history. You're learning dates. History is something that you must feel. And if you're not feeling it, and feeling it in common, it is not history. It's a series of dates. When Bob Marley sings in his song Slave Driver, that every time I hear the crack of a whip, my blood runs cold. I remember on the slave ship how they brutalized my very soul. He's not singing about a personal experience. And he's not singing about a date in a textbook. He's singing about a visceral reaction and a shared memory that shapes his outlook and, most importantly, his identity. That collective memory is as crucial to national development as many of the more traditional metrics that we tabulate and measure to see how far we've come as a people. If your history is a series of dates and not something that you feel, then you do not have a shared identity. And if you don't have a shared identity, are you a people? That's a question you have to ask yourself when you define yourself as a country and as a people. Baliso is periodically listed for sale by its purported owners for astronomical amounts of money, completely divorced from any scientific method of valuation. Curiously, these listings and relistings often coincide with Heroes Month in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and our attempts to celebrate the resistance of the Garifuna against British genocide. You can find Baliso listed online today for $30 million US. An astounding 253,125 EC dollars per acre for undeveloped land with no roads, no electricity, no water, no jetty, and very little beachfront. By contrast, head north to the Bahamas, and you'll see an island called Whale Key, an island that is listed for sale by Sotheby's, that is twice as large as Baliso, has a mile-long beach, a private villa, water, electricity, and a 4,000-foot airstrip. And yet it is listed for $3 million less than the salespersons are asking for Baliso currently. For years, in addition to the exorbitant price, government policy has undoubtedly caused potential purchasers to carefully consider whether Baliso is worth the money to them. We have stated that no alien's landholding license would be given to any foreign purchaser who did not take into account the cultural and historical importance of the island. We have also made it clear that government policy would inform our planning department in the types of authorized developments that could take place on Baliso. So, the position has been, some people have listed it for sale, but if you're a foreigner and you buy land in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you have to get something called an alien landholding license. You have to get a license to own land in St. Vincent and the Grenadines if you're a foreigner. And the government has said, good luck trying to get an alien landholding license to build your private villa or your whatever on Baliso. We want to see what you want to do to memorialize the history, the important history of Baliso. And we've said that beyond the alien landholding license, we have a planning department that has to approve whatever you hope to build somewhere. And good luck getting your plans past the planning department. And while successive governments in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, this one and previous ones, have actively tried to facilitate investment in other privately owned real estate in the Grenadines through actions like passing specific laws to streamline the development of Mustique or Canawan or Isle de Cat, we have passed no such legislation to encourage investment in Baliso. Further, we have, in the past, sought from the current purported owners of the land a development plan that could take into account the immense historical significance of Baliso, but no plan has been forthcoming. However, our protective and discerning approach to Baliso is being assailed by increasingly aggressive attempts to sell the island and the rapid growth in our tourism sector, which may encourage land speculation. Similarly, our continued maturation as an independent nation, as well as our growing attempts to reclaim, retell, and remember our collective history, dictate a reevaluation as to how we treat with Baliso as part of our shared memory and shared patrimony. In that light, permit me to quote a letter written by Prime Minister Gonzalez to the Chief Surveyor on January the 2nd, 2024, on the subject of Baliso. So you do get a few words from the Prime Minister. I'm going to quote this letter. It's Dear Chief Surveyor, and the subject of the letter that he wrote on the 2nd of January is acquisition of Baliso by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I'm going to read the letter pretty much in full. Further to my oral conversation instructions on the above captioned matter, I state the following. 1, it is the intention of the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to acquire Baliso as a cultural, historic, memorial site from the fee simple owners as per the law and constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. 2, the acquisition is grounded on the necessity and desirability of keeping this historic Baliso as part of our national patrimony. 3, the current owners of Baliso have not shown any practical inclination or the possession of the means to develop Baliso at all, or in the context of the historical cultural requisites attendant upon such a development. 4, almost every year, around March 14th, the anniversary of the death of His Right Excellent Joseph Chateau, a national hero, agencies acting on behalf of the owners of Baliso or of those with an interest to profit from the sale of Baliso agitate our people unnecessarily with astronomical asking prices for Baliso, completely unrealistic. 5, the declaration by my government not to grant any foreigner as purchaser an alien landholding license for Baliso or to permit any development contrary to the historical cultural requisites. 6, on the nearby island of Batoye, no development whatsoever will be permitted. It will be kept as a bird sanctuary and natural habitat. 7, I spoke to, and he says the name of the lawyer, for the, quote, owners of Baliso a few days ago about this matter. I informed him that the Chief Surveyor will be in touch with him for discussion relating to purchases, if there is agreement, or acquisition, if there is no agreement. Clearly, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines must ascertain that this lawyer's clients actually have good title to Baliso. I am sure that the Attorney General will assist you in this regard. Meanwhile, I am requesting that a relevant valuation be done soonest. The government considers this matter one of urgency. I am hopeful that the transaction, purchase or acquisition, can be effected before March 14th, 2024. Then he goes on, all the best to you, and signs it. Now, I am not optimistic that the Prime Minister's target date of March 14th will be met. When I checked the Chief Surveyor yesterday, he informed me that valuers had only recently been able to visit Baliso personally and had not yet completed their valuation report for the island. He also told me that he had encouraged the purported legal representative of the owners to seek their own independent valuation of the property to form a scientific basis for any attempted negotiations as to the potential purchase by the government. Similarly, the Office of the Attorney General has advised that the title history of Baliso is convoluted and possibly incomplete, and that they are still unraveling the various bequeathments and claims on the land by the descendants of prior title owners. As such, March 14th, to my eyes, I haven't discussed this with the Prime Minister, but to my eyes, March 14th appears to be unlikely. But I will not presume to speak for the Prime Minister on this matter. He speaks to the nation on Thursday, on Heroes Day, and I don't know. He may have other information. But nonetheless, whether we miss the original target date is beside the point. The intent of the Prime Minister's letter to the Chief Surveyor is clear and unambiguous. We seek to reclaim the historic Baliso as part of our collective memory and part of our shared patrimony. It is well known that Prime Minister Gonsalves has been active and activist as a champion of reparatory justice for the victims of the transatlantic slave trade and indigenous genocide. He was an early and consistent champion of CARICOM's 10-point plan for reparatory justice. That 10-point plan states unambiguously that, quote, European governments instructed genocidal actions upon indigenous communities. Under point 3 of CARICOM's 10-point plan, CARICOM states, among other things, that, quote, the governments of Europe committed genocide upon the native Caribbean population, and that genocide and land appropriation went hand in hand. It is that nexus between genocide and land where we seek to redress and address the issue of Baliso within the context of the Prime Minister's stated policy on Baliso. At the recently concluded CELAC summit in Bocaement Bay, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the community of Latin American and Caribbean states adopted a declaration that, quote, reaffirmed our commitment to the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the American Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It is worth recalling that the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is, I'm quoting, concerned that indigenous peoples have suffered from historic injustices as a result of, among other things, their colonization and dispossession of their lands, territories, and resources, thus preventing them from exercising, in particular, their right to development in accordance with their own needs and interests. It is also worth noting that Article 11 of the UN Declaration states that indigenous persons have the right to practice and revitalize their cultural traditions and customs. This includes the right to maintain, protect, and develop the past, present, and future manifestations of their cultures, such as archaeological and historical sites and artifacts, and designs, ceremonies, technologies, and visual and performing arts and literature. The UN Declaration goes on to assert that indigenous peoples have the right to the repatriation of their human remains. This strong language must be read in the context of the CARICOM 10-point plan, the history of the Garifuna of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and our own unambiguous policy on Baliso. The United Nations universally agreed Sustainable Development Goals, which were formally adopted and integrated into the development policy of this government, specifically mentions indigenous peoples in their assertion that, quote, people who are vulnerable must be empowered. The Sustainable Development Goals contain specific references to the doubling the agricultural productivity of indigenous small farmers, and ensuring equal access to all levels of education and vocational training for indigenous peoples. The CARICOM 10-point plan correctly states that a development plan is required to rehabilitate indigenous communities ravaged by genocide and its myriad present-day legacies. While it is not part of the mandate today, even though I misunderstood the mandate today, but it's important to recognize, even in passing, that this government has invested heavily in the development of the descendants of Chatoyer on multiple transformative fronts. We have connected the north of the island to St. Vincent physically and spiritually, to the remainder of the country, literally bridging the divide that existed north of the Dry River. We have taken secondary education to the neglected communities in the north for the first time in our national history, and will begin this year the country's most advanced secondary school, not coincidentally on the grounds of the very plantation house that was once inhospitable to Garifuna descendants. We ensure that the young people of these historically marginalized communities have affirmative access to scholarships, training, and entrepreneurial grants. We have worked hard to build community resilience through large investments in better housing, better roads, and sea defense in vulnerable communities. We invest in the broadcast of Garifuna Radio, and we have invested in enabling local historians to work on the publication of a concise history of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which will tell the Vincentian story in a Vincentian voice, as it has never been comprehensively been told before. It is that process of historical reclamation, retelling, and remembrance that informs our position on Baliso. We view it as inseparable from the more tangible and measurable efforts to develop St. Vincent and the Grenadines as a truly post-colonial country. Haile Selassie once noted that an awareness of our past is essential to the establishment of our personality and our identity as Africans. That awareness, that collective memory, is the cornerstone of our identity and self-belief as members of this proud Caribbean civilization. Garifuna history, Vincentian history, cannot be erased or ignored or once again subjugated to the narrow interests of moneyed interlopers with no sense of or sensitivity to the currents and confluences that shape the Vincentian identity. This is our story to tell. This is our future to chart. And this is our identity to reclaim. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you. Thank you, Minister of Finance, Camilo Gonzalez. He understood the assignment. Don't you agree? Give him another round of applause. All right. So just to recap a little bit of what he said, Baliso is for sale for $30 million US. Any bidders? I tell you. But thanks to the government and Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, we will continue to push and ensure that Baliso is for the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The young people, you heard him. He said that we have to utilize you. And you know the little TikToks that you utilize? Now is a good time to have TikTok on Garifuna, TikTok on our heritage, TikTok on our history. What you say to that one? Yes? All right. So you ingrain the culture and ingrain the heritage in your lives. All right? Okay, so he spoke on the topic Baliso, representation of reparatory justice for indigenous people in the Caribbean. Next to the podium, Miss Hoyt. No, let me introduce her properly. We do things properly here at the Garifuna Heritage Foundation and at the UWI Global Campus. And in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, right? All right. Joan E. Hoyt holds a law degree from Syracuse University, New York, a legal education certification from the University of the West Indies, Hugh Wooden Law School, Trinidad, a master's degree in international relations from the Maxwell School of Citizenship, Syracuse University, and a bachelor's degree from Brooklyn College, New York. She is a fellow of College of Labor and Employment, which is a professional organization honoring the leading American lawyers in the practice of labor and employment law. She is an attorney at the National Labor Relations Board, an independent agency of the United States government that is responsible for protecting the rights of private sector workers. Currently, she is in a 6-month assignment to the United States Congress House of Representatives as Labor Counsel to the Democrats on the Education and Workforce Committee. She, her husband, and 2 children live in Washington, D.C., where she is an elected, nonpartisan advisory neighborhood commissioner responsible for advising the government of the District of Columbia on issues affecting her community, including crime, safety, economic development, education, emergency preparedness, healthcare, housing, infrastructure, social services, taxes, transportation, and zoning. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Joan E. Hoyt.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be home, and I thank the members of the group that put this together for inviting me. It's a very lofty thing to be invited to speak for your people, and I want to start off this by saying I appreciate the recitations of my accolades, but I am not here to speak as a representative of the government, either of the United States or the District of Columbia. I'm here to speak on my own behalf. Bear with me. This is what happens when you don't print out your your event, but bear with me 1 second, please. My sister told me this would happen. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Any worthy debate on Baliso must by right be based on our nation's history. And as you have heard from my predecessor at this podium, he knows a lot about the history more than I do, or at least he has, it seems, access to it. I did my research, and I am going to rely on that. So, though I am not a historian, many, including my good friends, Dr. Adrian Fraser and Dr. Gary Denny, are prominent scholars on the subject and have generously shared their knowledge with me when I sought their advice. I am grateful for the research and analysis of the aforementioned historians and countless regional academics that have improved my knowledge of our nation's one-of-a-kind sustained resistance to the colonialist empire-building efforts in the Caribbean. I am here, as I mentioned, as a Carib from Sandy Bay. who for years had been hoping that someone would speak about the relevance of Baliso from the point of view of the Caribs, especially those with roots over the river in the Carib communities ranging from Orinchil to Fancy, as well as those in Greggs and Rose Hall. Well, you know what they say, be careful what you ask for. My wish has been granted, and because this is one of the most important assignments that I have ever embarked on, I decided I had to learn as much as I could. So I read every single historical document that I came across, and there were many. I relentlessly picked the brain of my two historian friends that I spoke about. I examined the press releases and speeches by the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, as well as his book, The Case for Caribbean Reparative Justice. I reasoned and looked at the I'm a little here, excuse my language a while. I read the NDP's manifesto announcing the Garifuna Charter, which envisions a foundational framework for growing the relationship between the Garifuna people in the diaspora and St. Vincent. I consulted with friends, and over the river, my colleague, Dr. Cadwin Gill, the Honorary Consul General of St. Vincent in California, and with a former UN ambassador from Dominica, who is knowledgeable about the Kalinago people in Dominica. I engaged with all the indigenous groups in the United States. Remember, I'm telling you, I had to learn, right? So I'm doing my research here. And most importantly, I spoke with my counterparts, leaders, community leaders, elders in the over-the-river community, because I wanted to get gauge their sentiments about what Baliso means to them. And from all of that, I learned that Baliso was a deliberate attempt by the British to systematically erase the Carib population, first by deporting them and interning them, some 5,000 men, women, and children on Baliso, and shortly thereafter banishing them, those who survived, that is, to Honduras. To complete that erasure, the colonizers banned the use of the Carib language by those who evaded capture or failed to surrender by hiding in the mountainous interior of St. Vincent, Greggs, Rose Hall, and over the river. I also learned that there's a big divide between the relevance of the returning Garifuna diaspora and the indigenous folks who live in my part of the country above the river. To the returning diaspora Garifunas, Baliso is a secret place of religious and spiritual significance that connects them with their ancestral identity and to which a pilgrimage is considered a rite of passage. Additionally, in recent decades, Baliso has become a national, regional, and global rallying cry in the reparations debate. And that debate gained momentum with the returning Garifuna diaspora. Conversely, most over-the-river indigenous Caribs, like many Vincentians, are unaware of Baliso's history. To them, Baliso is a Grenadine island with a potential tourist attraction, a place to visit like Fort Charlotte, La Soufrière, the Falls of Baleine, or Salt Pond. Every single indigenous over-the-river person with whom I have spoken told me This was the first time that anyone had sought their opinion on Balisso's importance. None of them had ever visited Balisso. Most were ambivalent about wanting to visit. A few expressed an interest in visiting, but saw the geographical distance and the lack of any regularly scheduled or public transportation service to get there as deterrents. Geographical and accessibility considerations aside, when asked about the government proposed acquisition of Balisso as a National Heritage Site, they responded to me, "What's in it for me?" It is an important question. It must be answered. And with clarity and conviction, I reply, everything. Let me talk about history, education, and land in St. Vincent. Our unique history. It's been over 2 centuries since the British selected Balisso as an internment camp of approximately 5,000 of our ancestors who were deported there in 1797 at the end of the Second Carib War and were later expelled. They expelled the survivors to Honduras. And as Dr. Kenneth John wrote, the remaining captives were placed in reservations smack in the most infertile area of the country, forbidden to purchase land or to grow sugarcane, the chief cash crop. To complete their indignity, they were stripped bare of their language, customs, and the general way of life. Yet, as a product of the St. Vincent Public School, a graduate of the St. Vincent's Teachers College, and a teacher in the St. Vincent Public Schools, I was not taught, nor had I any knowledge about Balisso's role in Britain's intended annihilation of my ancestors until I migrated to the United States. My ignorance was not unique. Although I did not attend high school or secondary school, many of my friends who did similarly were unfamiliar with our history. That's because the British controlled our education and taught us only what was necessary to maintain our intellectual loyalty to colonial subjugation. Thus, all history books and lessons glorified the rule Britannia, the sun never set on the British Empire ideology. We had to sing God Save Our Gracious Queen, a mindless homage to the inheritor of that same crown. That, as an institution, gave the orders to annihilate my ancestors and steal their land. But I digress. For to the extent that Balisso was ever mentioned in our history lessons, it was as a place befitting the treacherous Caribs, whom the colonists had long falsely demonized as cannibals and savages to justify removing them from their land. That whitewashed version of history has long been discredited by archival documents kept by the colonists themselves and by the personal accounts passed down orally by our ancestors, both here and those who were deported. To quote America's founding father, George Washington, who spearheaded America's Revolutionary War to gain independence from Britain around the same time when our Carib ancestors were fighting Britain to maintain their right to be. The truth, according to George Washington, will prevail where there is pain to bring it to light. How prophetic. From the painful ancestral memory of those who survived internment and death on Balaso, the unvarnished truth has been preserved and unveiled. And while our nation owes high praise and gratitude to the Garifuna diaspora historian, while our nation owes gratitude to the diaspora historians for preserving our history, they exemplified the proverb that until the lions have their historian, tales of the hunt shall always be glorifying the hunter. Our ancestral lions now have their historians, including many who are themselves the descendants of those lions. Sovereign pride is my next point. There is ample historical evidence that prior to the 1763 Treaty of Paris, when France ceded St. Vincent to Britain, Europeans generally recognized St. Vincent as a neutral country because our forefathers were determined to preserve that sovereignty. I'm going back to quoting Dr. Kenneth John again. He said, the Caribs were fiercely protective of their way of life and assertive of their rights. They would not voluntarily yield an inch of their fatherland or compromise on principle. Now I go to neutrality. From 1763, can I have some water, please? A little dry mouth. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Excuse me. Thank you. From 1763 until 1767, when the King of England gave Surveyor William Young, he who Young Island is named after, as you've heard, gave him orders to come down here and survey the land for plantation selling and building, Young reported back to England that our rich soil gave the potential, or had the potential, to become the most valuable sugar exporter, second only to Jamaica. In 1768, Britain's emissary met with our chief, Joseph Chatouet, to inform him St. Vincent was ceded to Britain and King George held sovereignty over St. Vincent, and Britain intended to relocate Chatouet and his people to make room for plantations. And Chatouet had one comment for him. What king? But several skirmishes with British planters encroaching on Carib land and Caribs' resistance to destroying surveyors' equipment and raiding their plantation led to both the First and Second Carib War. And as you all know, what happened at the end of the Second Carib War. But I want to mention that I've looked at this map that was issued right around the time at the end of the First Carib War, when Young and the Caribs engaged in this treaty or agreement to be at peace with each other. And in that map, there's a line running from Wallaboo on the leeward coast to Connery River on the windward side. And everything above that is designated Carib territory. It's not just above the river, right? We were given all that land. But what happened? the British planters were not satisfied with they thought that their governor or whomever had negotiated this had given the Caribs the best land, and so they started encroaching on that bit of land. And that led to the Second Carib War because the Caribs were not having any of this. And I'm saying all of this because I am so damn proud, excuse my language though, of my people. And the fact that they were not putting up with any crap, excuse me, okay? They were not doing it, all right? So, I'm sorry, I know there's school students here, but one can't avoid being passionate about something that's so endemic to one's own being, okay? Excuse me. While locally this was about Carib anger and insidiousness to the British land grabbing activities, the Caribs were also encouraged and supported by the French, whose revolutionary ideas of liberty and the desire to remain citizens of a free nation were relevant. But the French were no angels. They all were the same ones who ceded St. Vincent to the British. And as I said before, it's that cessation of St. Vincent that led to the Second World War, and the Second Carib War, not the Second World War, and eventually the killing of Paramount Chief Joseph Chatoué and the expulsion of most of his supporters. And here comes the pride part of what I'm presenting. No other people in the New World kept their nation from being free of the plantation and slavery system for so long. This was happening at a time when the sun never set on the British Empire. You all, I don't know if you remember singing that Rule Britannia, Britannia Rule the Waves. Well, that's what was happening when our little guys dressed in loincloth was giving them a run for their money. And the colonialization had already began on all of the other surrounding islands, starting as late as the 1400s or early 1500s. Barbados, St. Lucia, Grenada, although there was a little bit of rebellion in Grenada too, but St. Vincent was seen as the place where runaway slaves would hightail it over here. St. Vincent was like the north of America, right? In America, there's the south that was a plantation system. And because people are innately seeking freedom, they'll take what's considered the Underground Railroad, if you've heard about it, and escape to the north and Canada for freedom. Well, St. Vincent was equivalent to the north and Canada because the slaves on surrounding islands knew which tide to wave or ship to hop on or whatever, but they made it over here, all right? So there is, I really do not know. I've seen history or information about how the blacks first got to St. Vincent to be free. And I don't think we need to debate that. The fact is they got here, our people welcomed and invited them. We all became, I should say our people because, you know, I am one of a mixture of blacks and Caribs. But the fact that we made sure we preserved that independence and we fought for it, if that doesn't make you proud, I don't know what else is going to make you proud. So, as a result of that, this country had a slave plantation or enslavement plantation system for only at least 36 years. Am I right, Dr. Denny? 36 years, imagine that. Most other surrounding islands in the Caribbean, you know, Columbus came, even though he didn't discover our island and said he did, but they made it so that opened up and they were, the European powers were trading islands like they were gift cards when they ended each war. But they couldn't do that with St. Vincent because they realized those are bad people in St. Vincent. Don't go down there. And even though they told this lie, which I would get into in a while, about cannibalism, I've read that most ships leaving England or France or Spain, because the church was such a part of those societies, were blessed, right? By the church, the leader of the church, bless them. Have a God be with you on your trip to the Caribbean or to Africa to collect slaves. God bless you when you come back by bringing back the profit from those slaves, right? And the only way the church could really have a straight face by blessing them is to know that the people in the Caribbean were really not human beings, right? Because it would be easy to kill them, since the church, one of the commandments in the Christian Bible, thou shalt not kill. So you don't want the church blessing people who are going down there to kill brown people who are protecting their rights. And therefore they designate them savages because these people would not convert to Christianity. And so we have this anomaly, one can call it. Now, I've spoken about the uniqueness of our history, and I know some would say, but what about Haiti? You know, Haiti had a revolution up there, and black people, it became the first group of enslaved people to take over their country. It is true, but we prevented slavery from happening in our country in the first place, and that is the difference. Okay? That is the difference. And it's not until they got rid of us, our really, really good warriors, that they were able to come in. So when you, high school students, when you hear about that, remember to tell anyone that you hear. I mean, I stand before people and say, yeah, I know Haiti is very, very important, but have you heard about the Caribs of St. Vincent? Because if you hear about them, you can change your opinion, man. We had a place down here. All right? So, how do you build on that pride of place? Because in addition to the skill of warfare that our ancestors had, they were skilled seafarers and canoe builders. They traded from the northern coast of South America all the way up the chain to the larger Antilles islands of Cuba, Puerto Rico, Jamaica. How is it that these people were supposed to be stupid and savages and couldn't be educated? And they knew how to read the stars. My father, God bless his soul, he was a fisherman. And I remember, well, that was one of his trade, right? Because he was a farmer, woodcutter, blah, 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 blah. But this is the part. His fishing skills were so unique because he knew how to read the sea, and he knew how to read the stars, and he knew how to read the moon. So that he'll go, and you all will remember my sisters who were sitting here, we'd go to bed at night, and like 2 o'clock in the morning when the moon was at a certain distance in the sky, Pappy would head off for the ocean, or the Atlantic Ocean, right, which is washes the shore of Sandy Bay. And by 5, 6 o'clock when we wake up, he was on his little catamaran, or he called it a catamaran. It's a little dugout canoe that he built himself. He had this awesome string of fish, which we shared for everybody. He did that because he knew when whatever fish was running, he would say, or whatever fish was biting. Where did he get that knowledge from? He did not have the kind of education. Made a few years ago around Baliso, and someone went out to Carib country and videotaped this young man. Well, many people who were saying, oh, we didn't know about Baliso, blah, 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 blah. But this one young man, he said he attended North Union Junior School, and that they asked him how he felt about that. And And he said, me not like it, you know. And they wanted to know why. And he said, because every time we down there, the people of them who me go to school with, they won't call me stupid carrier. How is that possible in this country? How is that possible? It breaks my heart that this young man, who is one day going to grow up to be a father, a husband, has to deal with this. Dr. Catherine here, my friend, who is now a doctor up in California, and is also the honorary consul general to Fort St. Vincent out in California. He told me this story. He said, John, this happened to me when I came to town to go to high school, and I had to get into a fisticuff with someone who called me a stupid carrot. It has been going on for too long, and I'm imploring and begging that you all understand. It is a sad day when we treat each other that, okay? So, and I want to deal with this part about what's in a name. You know, that which we call a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet. That's what William Shakespeare used in Romeo and Juliet to convey that naming of things is irrelevant. As an initial matter, throughout this presentation, I've been referring to myself and the village people of St. Vincent as the Caribs. Also, as an initial matter, I accept that those in the indigenous diaspora who are returning speak of themselves as Garifuna. And I respect and appreciate that. And I think they ought to, because a name is a name is a name. People have said to me, why do you want to go around archaeologists from Syracuse University and Farmingdale College excavated this colonial era 12-acre site in Antigua and scrutinized it for the remains of Amerindians who were buried there for over 2,000 years, before Columbus and after Columbus. And they found that the diet of those people were mostly of shell animals, corn, and fish. They hoped their findings would correct the speculative and erroneous colonial accounts of Caribs as man-eaters. I hope that what I just told you would debunk the savage myth that continues. It's ignorance and it prejudices the Caribs. Every man, woman, and child over the river has been subjected to derogatory comments. So, my last point is on land. The British forced, as I said, our ancestors into the most infertile parts of the country, forbidding them to purchase land to grow sugarcane. I told you about the map that said everything north of Wallabu and Connery was Carib land. British planters took our land. They never compensated us. They killed Chatwin, expelled him, his followers, and the remaining, those of us who remained, fled to the mountains. We are now asking, or at least I am asking on behalf of my people, that the government consider the land above the river to be Carib land, and not Crown land. Nobody sold it or bought it to the Crown. How is it Crown land? So, to the extent that there's land over there, I think it should rightfully go freely to the Carib people. And so, I hope from my mouth to the Prime Minister's ears and the rest of the intention population, I wanted to end because my mouth is running dry again. Bear with me, I have this poem that I wrote up and I think is worthy of being the exclamation point on my speech. I hope my son did not. Because I'm going to get mad if he. There it is. Ode to Baliso by Joan White. Baliso, Baliso, land of death, of 32 isles in the Grenadines, so hostile, inhospitable rock, upon your barren windswept shore. No respite from the cruel sun, no soil for planting, no animals for hunting, surrounded by water, but no water for drinking, for washing, for cooking, no trees for shelter or canoe building, no place for living, no way of escaping home to Hiruna, whose verdant lands in the distance brittle quickly divide into plantations, while on your parched shores, O Baliso, perished and left to rot, and 500 Carib patriots. Baliso, O Baliso, land of defiance. You could not destroy their indomitable spirit, nor vanquish those 3,000 years of sovereignty, of the right just to be. For whether red, yellow, or black Caribs, when charged with treason by the crown, defiantly refused to bow down, some vanished when ordered to surrender into Garifuna's interior, and of the 5,000 delivered to your internment, O Baliso, half defiantly refused to die, only to be exiled to an unknown, distant, enduring isle. But Baliso, oh Baliso, land of rebirth, take no credit in your role of ending centuries of resistance to colonial gold. For our ancestors' lamentations carried on the winds of supplication, proved mightier than Britannia's rule, hastened the sunset on thy empire, while everywhere, both near and far, Joseph Chatway's descendants, like phoenixes, have arisen, restoring our language, our culture, our bravery, our gallantry, our history. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hoyt. And she was so bang on in terms of the passion coming through. She had to cool down with some water. All right? And she spoke on the, let me get it right, the significance of Baliso to the indigenous peoples of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Another round of applause. Attorney at law, U.S. Congress in Washington, and a sister, a daughter of the soil of Sandy Bay. And she spoke on the importance of, you see some of our students leaving it, wish they could, but it is coming back, okay, good. She spoke, it's important at this stage. She spoke on the importance of naming yourself. All right, I remember the cowboys. Cowboys was supposed to be a derogatory word, but now everybody is a cowboy. So the blacks were supposed to be the cowboy, but now whites and other races embrace the cowboys. So we have to embrace what is ours, and sometimes what they take to, as the Bible says, make to be bad, we make it to be good. All right? Hence the Garifuna and the indigenous Carib indigenous peoples. I want you to do a little something because I know everybody's a little tight. So if you like, you can stand, or if you want, you could just take a little stretch. All right, just take a little stretch, especially the students. If you like, just take a stretch. It's important. Just a little stretch. Yes. All right, don't be shy. All right? And also, I just want you to say something. We have to remember Châteauye, right? So I'm going to say long live, and you're going to say Châteauye. All right? So long live, and you say Châteauye. Oh my goodness. What was that?